I am really, really excited about today's topic. And one of the reasons is that it really combines two of my really, really great interests. The first one is my hometown, the city of Milwaukee. And as we talk about best practices, we're going to use Milwaukee as an example of attracting tech hub, of attracting tech talent to a region. And I absolutely love the city of Milwaukee. It's my home. And let me start by telling you about our lake. Milwaukee wouldn't be Milwaukee if not for Lake Michigan. It's a body of water that always manages to put life into perspective. Standing on the sand on Bradford Beach looking east, I would have to cross 80 miles of water before reaching dry land. And in much the same way that looking into the nighttime sky has a way of scaling the relative significance of our problems, so too does looking across the vast expanse of Lake Michigan. I absolutely love the views over our lake. I also love the views across our city. I love that I can stand on the top floor of Milwaukee's buildings like the US Bank Center or the Northwestern Mutual Tower and look across a sea of church steeples stretching for miles and reaching for the sky. I love that at one time her many unique neighborhoods with names like Bayview and River West, Walker's Point, and Bronzeville had a bar almost on every single corner. And although many have since been converted to homes and apartments, the classic barfront architecture is still readily discernible as one drives or walks about our city. I love our history of work and its workers. They don't call Milwaukee the machining capital of the world for nothing. Our manufacturing base and our economy have been built on the backs of manufacturers like Harley Davidson, A.O. Smith, Allen Bradley, Briggs and Stratton, Falk Corporation, and of course our breweries with names like Miller and Schlitz and Pabst and Blatz. In many ways, our city owes its history to these brands and to the hundreds of small companies that supported them and to the workers that made them what they were and what many still are today. The Milwaukee work ethic is alive and well, and in many ways, thanks to opportunities provided by these and other employers. You know, as I started my week this week, the dashboard on my truck reminded me that it was 6 degrees below zero in the city of Milwaukee, 6 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. And that's not the wind chill factor. We don't worry about that here. -6 was the real temperature. And I loved it. I love Milwaukee and our changing weather and seasons. I love that while the wind bites at my face on a day like today, in a month or so, we will be playing what I call the weather lottery, when a 65-degree sunny day can be bookended by days in the 20s. That's one of the reasons that spring is my absolute favorite season. The snow disappears, the ice thaws, and the sun rises earlier every day over Lake Michigan's horizon and turns the beautifully jagged Milwaukee skyline a mix of crimson and orange and blue and purple as it sets progressively later in the evening, each evening, than it did the day before. Years ago, I took the photo on your screen from the deck of my sailboat a couple miles out on the lake as the sun closed up shop over my beloved Milwaukee. Summer in Milwaukee is like nowhere else with its variety of ethnic festivals, parades, outdoor dining, beaches, swimming, sailing, Veterans Park, Lake Park, and Summerfest, the largest outdoor music festival anywhere on earth. If you've never been, it's just impossible to describe Summerfest in words. In time, usually right after Labor Day, summer starts giving way to autumn. We actually have autumn here in Milwaukee. As the trees turn and drop their leaves, the weather cools, and Packer football kicks off. Now, I know the Packers are Green Bay's team, but any Milwaukeean will tell you that they're Milwaukee's team as well, as are the Brewers, one of the smallest market franchises in Major League Baseball. I've been a lifelong Brewer fan, and I will refuse to die until they win at least one World Series. Most of all, I love Milwaukee's people. We are still a city where perfect strangers meeting on streets with names like Wisconsin Avenue, State, and Brady Street are apt to look each other in the eye and smile and say hello like old friends. Milwaukee is a city of great people, many of them working to make it a city of opportunity for all. That's part of what gets me up out of bed every day, playing a small part of creating opportunities not just for people in my city, but for those across the Midwest. Yes, Milwaukee is my home with all of its perfections and imperfections. I love it here. I also love technology. Back in the 1980s, thanks to the business my father was in, ours was the first family on the block to have a camcorder, a VCR, and later a home computer. That early exposure for me sparked a lifelong interest in technology and what we call the exponential economy. Early in my career, I found myself in the role of vice president of a high tech radio frequency identification company, helping to lead a group of RF and electrical engineers in the innovation of bleeding edge tech. My fascination with technology was spurred once again as I learned about electromagnetic interference, integrated circuits, surface mount circuit boards, and asset identification using RFID. That interest morphed into a fascination with Moore's Law, how the speed at which we process information by non human means doubles every 12 to 18 months. This phenomenon, going back well over a century, is why we could advance in 15 years from my 2005 iPod that played music to a smartphone that has replaced my iPod and my calendar, my alarm clock, portable gaming console, remote control, calculator, wristwatch, and wallet, just to name a handful of items. All of this in 15 years. Industrial technology is far from immune from this rate of change, as smart sensors, smart devices, embedded smart technology, and data analytics have placed us at the dawn of Industry Infinity Point 0, where Moore's Law and these advancements collide, putting us on a trajectory of continuous industrial innovation and revolution. There will be no Industry 5.0, just a relentless pace of innovation. I love technology. So I love Milwaukee and I love technology. And for that reason, I love today's guest and today's topic. Kathy Henrich is currently the CEO of the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition, whose goal is to inclusively double the tech talent in Milwaukee. She has over 25 years of experience in the technology industry, including executive leadership of sales and partnership organizations. In 2017, she dedicated herself to ensuring individuals and organizations have the skills to succeed in the era of artificial intelligence and automation by pursuing her master's in workforce and talent development from LSU. Most recently, Henrich served as the senior manager of the future of workforce at Accenture, where she leveraged her executive experience to help clients with organizational design, talent planning, retraining, and change management required by digital transformation. In addition, she's involved in several boards, including Tech United and Wisconsin Policy Forum Economic Development. She also has been a private business owner since 1989. Kathy, what a pleasure to have you on Webinar Wednesday.
Hey, thank you very much, Matt. You made my job easy as we talk about Milwaukee, that's for sure.
Well, it's been my lifelong home, and I know it's a place that you and I are both extremely passionate about, which is one of the reasons that we're so excited to dive into this topic with you. Now, we mentioned in the introduction, you just had tremendous executive experience, both with IBM and Accenture. I know our audience will be eager to hear a little bit about your role in these companies and then how that experience plays into your role as the CEO of the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition.
Well, thank you very much. And, I did run a number of different organizations within IBM, about $500 million businesses. But what actually spurred my interest here to make the transitions that I've had over the last couple of years is the fact that, as we were automating different processes through AI and automation tools, what was happening is we were having to rapidly replace people at the same time. And, getting rid of skills over here and trying to hire a different type. I believe there was a better way, that we needed to bring talent along with us as we made technology transformations. So I went back to school, got my master's in workforce and talent development, specifically focused on AI and automation and that changing nature of work. And then after going back to IBM for a bit around working with them around the future of work, went and worked with individual organizations, as you mentioned, at Accenture. And so it's that perspective that I bring with me here of, we have a responsibility and an opportunity here to really transform the workforce. It's no longer that a tech hub has to attract all of the talent in order to become a tech hub. We have the opportunity to do it with the talent that's already here. And I think that passion, et cetera, there's just this opportunity to drive not only individual prosperity and create life-changing jobs, but also lasting economic prosperity here for the region.
Well, and I love the fact that you used the words "there had to be a better way," because I think in so many ways that that really characterizes the mission of the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition. Can you share with our audience how you are working to to create or find a better way, and also how you define technology? Is it such a key word in the title of your organization?
Yeah, I'm glad you started there because that often comes up as a question. And it was one of the first things we had to define as I came into the role. And what we decided to standardize on is CompTIA Cyberstate's report, which lists 50 industry codes and it lists 50 job codes. And so that includes everything from engineering to traditional IT to software development, et cetera, but even advanced manufacturing, which is, of course, so important here in the state. So it really is a broad set of skill sets. Now, with that said, we know there's major gaps in several areas here in the region, as well as, frankly, in the country. You know, things like software development, data, cloud, security, et cetera, and engineering actually have gaps, talent gaps across the country. So when we think about how to transform and inclusively double tech talent here in the region, we think of it in terms of how do I grow demand for those jobs, including telling this our story about the region and the fact that we are already a tech region with 80,000 tech employees and 2,000 tech companies, to one of a robust growing the robust startup ecosystem here, to recruitment of additional tech companies, but then matching that with the appropriate supply through K through 20 reskilling and the attraction and retention of individuals.
So Milwaukee already is in so many ways a destination for tech talent. We have tremendous technology talent already here. You know, it's interesting, Kathy. About a year and a half ago, we had a national organization that I'm involved with. That year, I happened to be the president, and we had our national meeting here in the city of Milwaukee. And I can tell you that people, when they were booking their airline tickets to come to MKE, our airport that shares a name with your organization, a lot of them, I think, were probably not expecting to be blown away by what they saw. But so many of them, when we took them into neighborhoods like the Third Ward, when we showed them all the great culture that our city has to offer, and it was the middle of summer, which was the perfect time to have them here, were absolutely blown away. Literally blown away by what Milwaukee has to offer. As I suggested in the intro, it's a city that I think just has a tremendous history and tremendous potential. And you know, we say that we may even be the most undiscovered city in the world, or certainly in the country, when it comes to quality of life, technology, and opportunity. Can you, for our audience, touch a little bit on what you think Milwaukee is, what makes Milwaukee unique in this environment?
Yeah, and I think it's funny. We think that we're an undiscovered gem, but so does Vogue. Vogue has to actually rated us as the coolest and most underrated city. So we have some credibility behind that. And what's really interesting is I think you mentioned it in the opening comments, right, around our quality of life and frankly our low cost of living. That's definitely a part of it, but it's also the people, right? And you mentioned the hard work ethic, et cetera, the innovation and the industriousness of our heritage. But we're also extremely generous, right? We're listed as the number one most generous city in the nation. And I think that plays out in the business environment where it's not, it is a city that is more than happy to utilize their networks, right, to help everyone, and truly believes in this kind of rising tide lifts all boats. And so therefore we can work together and collaborate and have everyone be successful. And then, I'd say the last thing is, we're kind of in this unique position from a technology perspective. We have, one of the reasons that we're often not recognized as a tech city is because a lot of that is embedded tech, right? And we're really in an interesting space right now where, physical products are meeting digital, and we understand that physical piece of it, and we're adding the digital component of it. And by doing so, really transforming essential products and industries. And that's such a critical, message here about what's going on in Milwaukee.
Well, and I think that's a great message when you do think about all that embedded technology and the great employers that are innovating inside of their product lines. We don't always necessarily even realize that level of innovation is going on. We combine that with, and I didn't realize that we were the most generous city in the country. That doesn't, I guess, surprise me, thinking about all the wonderful people that I know here. But when we combine both of those, so the technology side of things, we look at the fact that we're a generous city, that really creates a nice platform for creating partnerships. And I know partnerships are absolutely critical to the mission of the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition. Tell us about some of your partners and how they are involved with your organization.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I have one chart that lists all the different kinds, but one is like our corporations, because at the end of the day, you can reskill as many people as you want into tech, but at the end of the day, it matters that they get employed, right? And so, our members are directly informing and shaping everything we do, so that at the end, we're creating talent that matters to the region's employers. So our employers are one portion of it. The economic development organizations are another. We bring different skill sets. They bring skill sets in, recruiting companies, tax incentives, financing, all of that. We bring the talent around tech and how do how do we create those connections for them? How do we find the right talent, et cetera? We partner with our higher education institutes, right? They're an extremely important source of talent, both in the traditional source of young talent going through their undergraduate and graduate programs, but now also into reskilling of existing workforces. And we have some fantastic assets here in the region in higher education. The NM Data Science Institute, MSOE's computer lab, including AI, et cetera. And so each of these, reskilling partners, et cetera, there are collaborations that we have across each of these groups to directly inform our actions, but also to extend our impact.
Now, I know that the name of your organization, some might stop at the Milwaukee Tech Hub, and sometimes we hear it referred to as the Milwaukee Tech Hub. In addition to those partnerships, you add the word coalition, and I'm curious about that word. How are you utilizing coalitions at the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition, and can you give us an example of a successful one that you're proud of?
Yeah, I think these are the things that never hit the press because, we believe you have to build structural supports. And the way you do that is by creating partnerships and lasting infrastructure. So, for example, we created a coalition of K through 12 um, school districts and brought in help on strategic planning around inclusive computer science in the schools. Those school districts set their objectives, they set their plans, et cetera. And then we also built a coalition around nonprofits that could help in bringing the right resources to them. And those are the kinds of things that together we're much stronger. And the same is true. We have a similar kind of construct around reskilling partners. We're doing the same thing around employers because together we can actually learn from one another and make everybody more efficient in the process.
So, Kathy Henrich, who is the CEO of the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition, is our guest today. I've got to believe, Kathy, when you accepted that role, we were living. In fact, I know we were living in a different world, right?
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, we weren't all in offices on Zoom calls, working from home. And I also have to believe that given the current world that we're living in, you've had to some degree pivot your model and pivot your approach. So, with a growing workforce of remote workers, how is that impacting or affecting your ability to attract tech workers and businesses to Milwaukee? And also, how do the times that we're living in change the way that you market opportunities to potential partners?
Yeah, it's a really good point. It has changed everything and I think that's true of most organizations, right? It's created, obviously there's lots and lots of challenges, but it's also created different opportunities. We created a summer virtual internship program last summer, and within 6 weeks, because we saw, um, you know, um, internships being canceled, we actually went from concept to execution with 700 applicants and 120 students that we went through the program. And we did that in conjunction with the Commons. And so there are opportunities that are created. Same thing with, I'll call it mid-level talent. What we're seeing is actually an opportunity to really, welcome people back home. People are now choosing to come back to live in places based on quality of life and cost of living. And they also often come to places where they have, I call it, alumni connections in some general sense, right? They grew up here, they went to school here, they worked here at some point in time. And actually, we're seeing that play out, whereas Milwaukee has been an attractive place for remote workers. We were rated #2 by Finance Buzz as the second best city for remote workers. And we were actually in the top 5 throughout the pandemic of net migration in. So what we're seeing is that people are choosing to come back where they have strong, connections, taking advantage of that generous business environment to get connected as they come back. And they bring with them innovation. They often bring them with them a startup idea, and frankly, they contribute directly to the economy of the region.
So people coming back from all over the country to their home, Milwaukee, just a wonderful place to live, a wonderful place to raise a family. It certainly is a wonderful place, but we don't pretend that it is perfect. And so we both know that we've got work to do as a city in the areas of inclusivity and representation. So talk about how these two, especially in a year like 2021, following the year 2020, where so many interesting things happened in this space. Tell us about how inclusivity and representation play into your mission.
Yeah, so first of all, it's a really important question. I think you said it up front where our mission is to inclusively double tech talent in the region. We know we have talent here that can be brought into the technology space. And as a result, everything we do, we have a target or a goal to make sure that we have 50% from traditionally underrepresented populations, women, person of color, disabled, or veteran status. And so, with that said, that requires that you're looking for talent in different spaces, right? You're sourcing people into programs differently than you might have before. It's not only a 4-year degree. It requires that we look at non-traditional routes into tech. So, whether that's or a 2-year degree, whether that's a certification, or we just announced an apprenticeship program to be able to create that non-traditional route into skilling and getting paid while you get skilled.
And everything you just said is music to my ears. We're huge fans of apprenticeships. We're huge fans of third-party certifications, without question. Regular viewers of Webinar Wednesday also know that we are huge fans of finding ways to get more and more young people excited about careers in STEM and advanced manufacturing. And we know that it starts early. We know that it has to start as early as middle school, where certain students will start turning off to certain career pathways if they're not presented in a fashion that shows them how excited how exciting that they can be. So as we look to build, the future bullpen of tech talent here in the city of Milwaukee, what is the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition doing in the K-12 STEM space?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that we were doing strategic planning with school districts. We did it with 7 school districts in 2020, and we have a waiting list of others to get to as well. That helps by creating kind of that systematic structural support. In addition to that, we have, the second thing is really around hour of code. So last year we had almost 10,000 hours donated by individuals in the community going into the school districts to give students introduction to tech, whether that be in a coding experience or into, a recognition of the type of careers that exist in tech. That's a tremendous value in just kind of creating that spark. But then from there, you have to be able to cultivate it, right? And that requires it being offered in the school districts, et cetera, where strategic planning comes in place, and being able to develop the skills. So one of the other things that we're, stay tuned in this space is really a summer program, learning from what we did last year in the summer virtual internship program, but to develop specific skills around data and AI and the ethical use and use cases associated with that. And it will be specifically, again, targeted to make sure that we have at least 50% from traditionally underserved or traditionally underrepresented populations in tech.
Fantastic. And it's just so interesting to hear about and think about the number of different ways, Kathy, that you and your organization are leading in terms of creating tech talent here in the city of Milwaukee, attracting companies and tech talent to the city of Milwaukee. So many different avenues you're going down, and I know you've learned a tremendous amount over your tenure. What would you share with our viewers today who are maybe thinking about trying to do something similar in different regions of the country? Before we turn it over to Melissa for audience questions, what advice would you have for the folks that are on with us today?
Yeah, and this always comes back to me. When I became a manager, somebody said it's no longer about what you do, it's what you enable others to do, right? And I feel the same way about leading the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition. Yes, it's something about what we do as a coalition, but it's also about what we enable others in the region to do collectively. Because a small nonprofit doesn't change a region, right? If we're all honest about it, there's fabulous programs out there. What does change a region is when you get corporations, the government, school districts, nonprofits, et cetera, all rowing in the same direction. That's game changing. And that's the work that we're doing as a coalition.
Game changing work at the coalition. That's what this webinar is all about. And with that, Melissa, I would love for you to come on and tell us what audience you see coming, what questions you see coming across from the audience.
Absolutely. So the first audience question I have is, what are some of the most prevalent skills or competencies that technology companies are currently hiring for?
Yeah, it's a very good question. We actually did a study back in the fourth quarter looking at exactly this topic, because what we were looking for is essentially, where do we have excess tech skills, and that could be reskilled into those where we have not enough. And a couple of things. It validated what we thought on where there's not enough. Software development, data, cloud, security, engineering, right? All five top are our top five skills gap. And within that, each of those has very specific goals, like Angular's coming on in a big way, in the software development way, et cetera. But, each of those has very specific skill sets. What was also interesting about that study, though, is that we didn't have any where we had excess tech skills. So what we are seeing is gaps across the board. And so in order to fulfill those requirements for the in-demand tech skills, it'll require that we continue to upskill the tech employees that we have into those new skill sets, while bringing new people into entry-level tech roles within the region as well.
Excellent. Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Kathy, I'll pose this to you. Matt, if you want to chime in, feel free. How can an entire state work together to fully encompass success for all?
I'm glad you brought that up, because while we talk a lot about the region, I actually work across the state a lot, right? Up in Green Bay, with Titletown over in Madison. Actually, I talked to Eau Claire last week, right? Collectively, if you think about it, we're only 2 hours, hour and a half up to Green Bay, an hour and a half over to Madison. That's like crossing Silicon Valley, if you've ever been out there. And so if we're much stronger with those partnerships across the state than we are individually. And so we work very closely with them, both in the offering of different programming, et cetera, to help our region.
And Melissa, I'll answer that question from the standpoint of from an education standpoint, and building on what Kathy just suggested. It's been incredible, really, the last 2 or 3 years, the amount of collaboration that's taking place across education platforms in ways that they weren't maybe 5 or 6 years ago. We don't want to have a completely standardized education program across the state, but there are great opportunities for us to share best practices. And Kathy answered the previous question about what competencies technology companies are looking for. Most companies are looking for the same competencies. It doesn't vary in huge ways across the state. And so if we can find some standardized ways to define competencies, and we are in several organizations, and then figure out ways to instill those competencies in students. And when I say students, students of all ages, and that includes incumbent workers, that is a huge part of the solution. And so credit to our educators and our public policymakers across the state for making huge strides in recent years towards additional collaboration. So I would have that to add to Kathy's great answer. With that, Melissa, it sounds like we're about out of time. but I want to, first of all, thank our guest, Kathy Henrich from the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition. She is the CEO there. She had just great information to share with us. Every time I talk to Kathy, I get excited about what the future holds for our region and for our state. I want to thank our producer, Melissa Martin. Of course, we want to thank our audience for joining us for yet another Webinar Wednesday. We will be back next week talking about hybrid and electric vehicles. So as automotive technology continues to transform and continues to move toward more hybrids, more electric vehicles, more even autonomous vehicles, we see our educators looking at trying to find ways to change their programs, trying to find ways to create experiences for their students of all ages toward these new technologies. We'll have a gentleman by the name of Mark Weiss with LJ Create joining us to talk about that next week. We look forward to seeing you a week from today on Webinar Wednesday.